Kyler Murray's talking about James Conner and how it feels when he gets going.
Great. He's a horse, Obviously, it's hard to stop once he gets going. I thought he was going to crib the one. It might be the fastest I've probably seen him run in a long time. But no, it's great to see him get going. I know it's hard to get everybody the ball. Hard to get everybody the ball, and everybody wants to play great and have great performances. But that's part of this game. It's an unselfish group, and sometimes it's somebody else's day and it's somebody else's day this day. So I was happy for him.
6-2 this season when James Conner surpasses 100 scrimmage yards. The 163 yards rushing as a team, their most since week 9. That was very much, we can nitpick all we want about yesterday's game, Kyler and how he played the defense towards the end of the game. There's no nitpicking James Conner. He was that guy again, as he has been many, many times for this organization this season. He was that guy yesterday for the Cardinals.
Yeah, there is no identity for the Cardinals with their play style, like with the signature brand of football that they're known for, without the way that he plays and just how effective he has been over the course of the season. And as you outlined with that stat, like when he is established, when he is in a game to this degree, the Cardinals are pretty tough to beat. But when he is not, they're completely different football team, and that alone has made him so valuable to this team. I said it earlier in the show, I'll say it again. He's unquestionably the most valuable player on this team. It's not even close who else is in there. Like, even with Trey Benson and the talent that he has behind James Conner, where you can look at someone like Budda Baker and then drop off from him to Rabbit Taylor Demerson, like, it's just unquestioned how important he is to this team, how valuable he is to this team, and something that a lot of people covering the team, like Lauren and Tyler on the Cardinals Corner podcast, brought up kind of months ago, and someone to me maybe a year ago who wasn't really as in tap with the team as I am now, just time after time. Like, he is the leader of the team. He's the leader of the team just with how he plays, with how he talks, with how he demonstrates himself. He and Budda just unquestionably the two leaders of the team.
Yeah, he talked about his motor never stopping after the game.
For sure. I mean, it's a totally different ball game. That's a touchback. So yeah, that's the team we want to be. Hustle.
And he talked after the game about, and if you missed it in the middle of the game, he entered the game ranked 8th on the Cardinals all-time list. He passed Terry Metcalf, John David Crow, and Hall of Famer Charlie Trippi to move up all the way to number 5 all-time rushing yards in the history of the organization.
I just got my head down, man, and just when it's all said and done, I look up and see what I accomplished, but all glory to God for any milestone and anything that I'm knocking down and chasing.
Which is why your question that you asked me in the email is, and I'll let you ask it. In terms of historical context, the 4 guys who are ahead of him on this list, none of them played outside of 1 year of Stump Mitchell. None of these guys have played for the organization since they've been the Phoenix/Arizona Cardinals. So in some ways, he's kind of on an island to himself when it comes to anybody who's played with his organization, since they've moved here. But you asked the question, and let's have a conversation about this.
I would make the case that he's the best running back in Cardinals franchise history, in the Valley, at least I'll say. Because like Otis Anderson, those numbers, no one's getting to those anytime soon. His in St. Louis were ridiculous. It's strangely, Burnsy, been something that has eluded the Cardinals over the years since they moved here, became the Phoenix Cardinals originally, is like that franchise running back that they've had more than a couple of seasons. Because I think we're talking about the best Cardinals running back in franchise history, mean the totality of their career. Because if we're talking about the peak of their career, David Johnson, 2016, is not getting touched anytime soon. No. 2,118 yards from scrimmage, which I put an LOL next to in my email, just because that's absolutely absurd. But right now, James Conner is at 1,334 yards from scrimmage. He's got 3 games to go. He is on pace to get the second most outside of that DJ year. And then when you look at the totality of his career, yards from scrimmage, he's at 4,748. David Johnson at 5,347. And then tell me a little bit about Larry Centers, buddy, and just like the start of his career here in Phoenix, like a strange sort of hybrid back, if you want to call him that, more of a pass catcher than he was a runner. He had 6,275 yards from scrimmage, and maybe he's the guy you want to toss in this argument. Edgerrin James had 2 really, really good years here in Arizona as well, but there was never a guy who was here for 5, 6, 7, 8 years and kept it to that level, really outside of Centers.
No, Centers, and yeah, you had to have been here a minute to have gone through the Larry Centers experience. I know there are people out there listening who certainly have gone through it, and if Gambo were here, certainly he could speak to him as well. He was Look, he was a very popular player during a very rough time in the Cardinals and their franchise history. They were not very good when he was here. And so we would, and when I say I mean, I think the fan base, and to a certain extent the media as well, we would kind of latch on to players who were always good with the media, always good to talk to, always busted their ass for that organization, which you could not say about everybody who was employed by the Cardinals in and around the time of Larry Centers. He became a folk hero because of it. You never questioned his effort, energy, desire, all of those things. Would I rather have James Conner and what he means to this team than Larry Centers and what he meant to those teams? Every day that ends in Y.
Or the David Johnson experience of like that drastic drop off that came so suddenly in his career.
Yeah, yes, I'd rather have James Conner because the drop off hasn't been that drastic, and I think they've managed to understand how they need to feature him, how they need to use him. It doesn't always work. He's got, 8 games this year? They're 6-2 in games in which he's got over 100 scrimmage yards, which means there are a handful of games in which he hasn't gotten over 100 scrimmage yards, and they don't do well in those games. So clearly, it doesn't happen every week, what he did last week, but it's so important. It's so essential. I think he's the best. I think he's the most important running back the organization has had since they've moved here. And you know me, I'm not much of a give running backs the money kind of guy. I'm very glad they signed him to continue this because I don't know how much gas he's got left in the tank, but I think you have to ride this to the end if you're the Cardinals and see how much gas he's got left in the tank.
He's now up to 36 rushing touchdowns. That's the third most in franchise history, most for anyone here since the team moved to the Valley. David Johnson is on there at 33. He's ahead of him. Kyler Murray's on this list too. He's at 30, but he's approaching the franchise record there for Otis Anderson in terms of 46 rushing touchdowns, but it just feels like the length and the consistency of that because there are just too many journeys to go through the other guys. Like I mentioned, Edgerrin James was not peak Edgerrin James, but like 80% of peak Edgerrin James, which is just still a really, really good running back for those first 2 years in Arizona. And then like once I start going down this list, I'm mentioning like Beanie Wells and other names like that. Like, let's stop. Let's relax easy. We're digging a little bit too deep there to go in there. Like I said, the David Johnson peak unquestionably is the best, but man, the drop-off was crazy. There was the injury year as well when he only played 1 game, and you forget his rookie year, he wasn't even really starting for the whole year either. It was basically that one crazy supernova year. He gets hurt, and then he comes back and still has 940 yards rushing, 446 yards receiving. So not a supernova year there either. And so you just look at the consistency that James Conner has provided. To his credit, was a guy who coming into just his arrival here and just him playing here, the injuries is what I was really worried about. Yes, he misses a couple of games a year, but in terms of something that really keeps him down on the shelf for long term, hasn't happened.
Yeah, I think not the greatest testament, one of the great testaments to James Conner, what he's been able to accomplish. Think about how this year started. They drafted Trey Benson fairly highly, probably with the idea he's a phase out James Conner, phase in Trey Benson kind of player, kind of move. Okay, not only has that not happened this year, and maybe part of it is because James Conner was just too good to relinquish that position, but in a year in which you drafted Trey Benson, probably with the idea that he was insurance for you in case you were ready to move on from James Conner, not only has James Conner held that challenge off, he's established himself as a guy that demanded you bring him back. You had to re-sign him to a new contract, and that's probably not how you started the year if you were the Cardinals. You probably weren't thinking we're going to be in a position where we have to bring James Conner back because of what he means for the team. Maybe we can phase him out. James Conner, not phasing anything out. Still my job, still him. And Trey Benson still has time now to phase James Conner out in this offense.
Interesting trend I'll point out that I just noticed, and I'm sure we'll talk about later in the week. If you look at his usage, this is really when the bell cow sequence of the season is going to come for him. So he opened the year with 16 carries in 21 and then dropped to 9. And then he was at 18 and 19, dropped to 7. 19, 20, and 18, and then he dropped to 12 and 7. And now he's at 17, 18, and 16 carries in the last 3 games. He cannot have 7 carries on Sunday. No. He's going to need to keep getting the ball that much because of what he means to this team. And when he does, this team usually wins football games.
Thanks for watching Burns and Gambo. Click to see more from the guys and hit the button in the middle to subscribe so you never miss a video from Arizona sports.